Hello again, football fans, and welcome to another breaking news story here around the league. As some of you may have seen, but I think a large portion of the league is completely unaware. There's been a lot of news circling around the league the last couple days, but there's one big story out there right now that is going to be talked about for a few weeks. And so I wanted to just kind of get this out there for you guys. I'm sure you're all going to have an opinion and you're all going to be interested to see what happens. But there is breaking news out there, and it involves a juggernaut in the RFL. It involves a superstar in the RFL. The Columbus Explorers are going to be without superstar Daryl Johnson for what looks like 3 weeks. It could turn out to be just 2 games, but it might end up being 3 games. So terrible, terrible news for the Columbus Explorers. And that's not even the end of the bad news for the Explorers here on this Friday afternoon. And to discuss a little bit more about this news and what it means for the NRC, what it means for the Explorers, I've got Forbes with me to just kind of jump in a little bit. Obviously, Forbes, you've had a chance to play against the Explorers. You've had a chance to play against DJ. What is this, in your opinion, what does this mean for the Explorers if, in fact, he is out for the next 3 weeks?
Well, it means they're going to back up Everett Bradley, I believe. Steep drop-off is a 14 overall drop-off, going from an 89 to a 75 overall quarterback. And that probably means struggles ahead. Their next 2 games are at the Black Knights and then at home versus the Lumberjacks, their first divisional game. And if he's out for that 3rd week, it'll be against the Bulldogs.
Yeah, which is not ideal, right?
No,
like we really hope for the league's sake, right? Like we really hope that DJ is back after 2 games, because the idea of having the Columbus Explorers, who went undefeated, ran the table in season 7 to win the Relo Bowl, and then the London Bulldogs, who won the Relo Bowl in season 8, the idea of having those 2 teams for the first time ever, right? Because historically it could have never happened with separate files. For the first time ever, we're going to have the Bulldogs face off against the Explorers, and it's going to be a battle of the last 2 Relo Bowl champions. You desperately want, for the league, those teams to be at full strength, and you absolutely don't want the Explorers to go out there without the services of DJ.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, DJ is the heart and soul of this team. I mean, we saw them win the Relo Bowl and then go draft him. Right?
Right. Yes, right.
Yeah.
That's a great point. I forgot about that. They won the Relo Bowl, and I believe Everett Bradley was the starting quarterback in that Relo Bowl, correct?
No, it was someone else. I don't remember who.
Because Everett Bradley's been there for,
Everett Bradley's been there a while, but he wasn't the starter. They had someone else.
No, I think I want to say, actually, I think they made a trade with the Elks, maybe. But yeah, I think you're right. There was a move that was made, but you're right. They won the Relo Bowl, and then after winning the Relo Bowl,
they somehow got to the number 1 overall pick.
Had the first overall pick, and were able to get DJ with that first overall pick, which is, a little bit crazy, but it worked out. And so now we're looking at 2 to 3 weeks without DJ, and that's tough for the Explorers, but that's not even the worst of it, right? Like that's not even the worst news. I mean, that's really bad news, but when you add on the fact that they're also going to be without DeMarco Landolt for several weeks as well, you've got their biggest offensive player in DJ, and then you've got one of their biggest defensive players in Landolt, both of which out for the next 2 weeks. You talk about the schedule that they have. And, you just wonder, could we really see the Explorers lose on the road at the Black Knights?
I mean, if the Black Knights keep playing the way they have, it's definitely possible. I mean, I think they killed the Barons week 1. They had a close game against the Bulldogs week 2. They played the Lumberjacks tonight, which I would have to assume the Black Knights are favorited.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know that the Lumberjacks are. I mean, looking at the schedule, I don't know if there's more than one game on the schedule that the Lumberjacks would be favored in. Especially while they're without the services of Tim Pennington, right? Like they're not. Yeah, they're probably not going to be the favorite in very many games.
Especially with the Black Knights having Gino Gannon now.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think the Black Knights are a sneaky good team, right? So I don't think that. I think the Explorers will win at home against the Lumberjacks, even without DJ. To your point earlier, it is a big drop from DJ to Everett Bradley, but I think Everett Bradley is still a good enough quarterback to beat the Lumberjacks in that game.
Yeah.
But the Black Knights, who knows? On the road in London, like that could be a tricky game. And at that point, if that does happen, now we're talking about a 3-game losing streak for the Explorers.
If they lose to the Black Knights?
If they lose to the Black Knights.
Yeah, that'll
be week 2 on the road at the Steamers, week 3 on the road at the Desperados, and then week 4 on the road against the Black Knights. Now, in their defense, 3 straight road games, but still, you don't want that. I know that doesn't sit well with Bill. Like it's no surprise, it's no secret. That's not going to sit well with him, having lost 3 games in a row, regardless of whether or not he had his starting quarterback, regardless of whether or not he was home or on the road.
Yeah,
he has expectations that
had a streak where he lost 3 in a row in his career before.
Yeah, I don't know. I would imagine probably not, especially because you got to remember, a lot of times we didn't play 3 games in a row because there was always those automatic wins that were sprinkled in because of the 2 separate files. So, I think it's very, very rare, if it's ever happened, that the Columbus Explorers have lost 3 games in a row. But devastating news. You said it, Forbes, and I think you're right. It looks like Everett Bradley is now going to be the guy to step in. Certainly capable. Again, if DJ's only out for a couple weeks, if it's 2 games, could they go 1-1 with Everett Bradley? Absolutely. And for as terrible as the injury might be, with it being only 3 weeks, I do feel like even if they were to go 0-2, 1-2, however, if it's 3 weeks, if they were to go 1-2 and they were to start the year, what is that, 2-4?
2-4.
I still think that they have the ability to get back. You and I were talking a little bit off air. It's not exactly the type of division that scares you when you first look at it, right? And so I guess talk a little bit more about this division, because you have more experience certainly than I do when it comes to these teams, being that you're in the NRC and I'm not.
I mean, like you were just saying, if Bill loses all 3 of these and starts with 1-5, if he doesn't, if he doesn't decide to sell for whatever reason, I think even at 1-5, because they have the bye week right after that Bulldogs game.
Right.
I still think there's a good
chance
right
week, right? You still think they can win the division?
Even starting 1-5, I think they can win the division, because at best the Gunners are 2-3. At best, the Barons are 3-2. At best, the Lumberjacks are 3-2. So at best, he's 2 games outside the division lead in week 6, even going 0-3,
and has games against them. Right?
Yeah,
has a week 17 game against the Barons. Right. Yeah. A week 17 against the Barons, a week 16 against the Gunners, a week 10 against the Gunners, a week 9 against the Barons. Like, hasn't played either of those teams yet. So,
and assuming he does beat the Lumberjacks in week 5, there's a great chance he goes 6-0 in the division. So I don't think Bill's out of it by any means.
right. Right.
I mean, no one wants to start 1-5, but like we all know who the Barons are. You know, they lost to the Black Knights and lost to the Bulls, and their only win right now is against the Marshals. And if you look at the Marshals, they're 0-3.
Right. I think you brought up a good point, though. At some point in the next 2 to 3 weeks, the Explorers are going to have to, and Bill's going to have to sit down and kind of decide what he wants to do, right? Because again, you bring up the point. If you start 1-5, is there a part of you that doesn't want to take the risk and decides that maybe you've got some expiring contracts, maybe you've got some guys that are a little bit older, and you decide to sell off some of those pieces and just look to, kind of retool? You're not blowing it up. Like this isn't a situation where the team is ever going to be blowing it up, but are there some guys on expiring contracts that the Explorers might look at? You look at a guy like, a Dylan Cutler, right? Like he's on an expiring contract. Vondre Priester, expiring contract. Nathan Schmidt, expiring contract. Like there's guys that are very valuable to that team, but are on expiring contracts.
I do know he has Priester on the trade block.
Oh, so there you go. So then perfect example, because I don't envision a scenario. I don't envision a scenario where Dylan Cutler is going anywhere. He's only 26 years old. So, he sounds like a great candidate to re-sign and have solidifying that defensive line. But okay, Vondre Priester, perfect example. So we're talking about an outside linebacker. He's a mid 80s, but he's 29 years old. And so if you start the year 1-5, do you then look at this guy and say, I'm probably not going to re-sign him. And if I do re-sign him, it's because he didn't regress, but he might regress a little bit. He's 29 years old. Obviously the negotiations are going on right now on what the demands are, but maybe Priester is just asking too much. Bill decides he's got other guys that he wants to give an opportunity to. He would rather spend that money elsewhere. And so when you get to week 7 or week 8, rather than get nothing at the end of the year, try to get something in week 8, but you balance, like you said, they could still win this division. And if they win the division, they're still making the playoffs. And if they're making the playoffs, the fact that DJ and DeMarco Landolt got hurt in week 3 doesn't really matter. None of this matters. The fact that they start the year 1-5 doesn't matter once they get to the postseason, because once they get to the postseason, they're still the Columbus Explorers. Right. So, it's a tough day. It is bad news. Nobody likes to hear it. We've seen the injury bug has hit several teams early on this year. But again, for those of you that were not aware, Daryl Johnson will miss at least 2 games, possibly 3 games. And DeMarco Landolt, I believe, is going to miss the next 3.
Yeah, 3 to 4.
Is that what we saw? So basically Landolt and DJ are going to be gone, what looks like for the same amount of time. So
now it's also showing that he's also missing his starting left tackle and left guard for the same amount of time.
Yeah. AJ Clifton, right? But he's been out since week 1. So
yeah,
he's been out, and look what happened. AJ Clifton goes down and they lose 2 games in a row. Now, again, I'm not saying the reason they lose those games is because of AJ Clifton, but the fact is they lost their starting left tackle, and then they lost the next 2 games. Period. Like, that's not opinion. That's not really up for debate. It is what it is. And now you add on top of that their starting quarterback and starting linebacker. That's a lot to overcome. And you just hope that we're not talking. I've said this for the first couple weeks of the year. We're going to get to week 10, 11, 12, 13, and we're going to start thinking, oh my God, XYZ team is not going to make the playoffs. I can't believe this team is not going to make the playoffs. And I've thrown some names out there, like the Thunderbirds. I even said you, like the Diablos, myself, the Miners. We could get to week 13 and see some shocking teams not make the playoffs. Now, look at the Columbus Explorers. Look at the guys that they're missing. We could get to week 13. I know it's a weak division, but it's possible we could get to week 13, 14, 15 and say, oh, I don't think the Explorers are going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I'll be on the outside looking in, all from losing so many players in the first 3 weeks of the season.
Yeah, it's just really devastating news. And I appreciate you coming on, Forbes, to discuss this. I wanted to make sure I got this out there because breaking news around the league, I think that everyone is going to be shocked if they didn't already know about this. It's certainly something that's going to be talked about tomorrow. It will probably be talked about throughout the entire weekend, and certainly for the next couple weeks. If you're a fan of the Columbus Explorers, and if you're just a fan of the RFL in general, you don't like to see really good teams lose really good players. It sucks for the league. So again, Forbes, appreciate you coming on, taking the time. And again, breaking news from the RFL desk here, the Columbus Explorers will be without their superstar quarterback, Daryl Johnson, and linebacker DeMarco Landolt for the next few weeks. So, stay tuned, guys. We'll possibly have more on this as well as other breaking news as it comes available around the league. But until next time, thank you, Forbes, for joining me, and we'll talk to you later. Take care, guys.
See you.